Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, I know you as adults have played follow the leader as well, haven't you? How many of you has ever played follow the leader? Yeah, one or two of you, right? And so I remember as a kid, we would add a special twist to it. The leader would walk like a duck, and you would all have to walk like a duck. Do you remember that little twist on follow the leader, right? And you would say, walk this way, and you would walk as funny as you can, and then you would watch all the other people walking the same way. And it would bring about some laughter and some giggles and whatnot. Now, the problem sometimes is that when we are asked to follow Jesus, sometimes the noise of our daily lives gets in the way of following Jesus. It reminds me of a story, and this involves a plumber. And so I don't know if we have any plumbers in the church here, but if we do, you can think about this story as well. Now, there was a wife who was talking to her husband, and the husband was watching the football game, and the wife was saying, "Honey," and he was like, yeah, whatever, yeah, whatever. You know how sometimes men are when they're busy doing something, they sort of tune things down, right? So anyway, he was turning his wife's volume down, and he said, she said, "Did you know that we had a water breakage in the house this morning?" And he was like, yeah, whatever. Just I'm watching the game. And do you know that the entire basement flooded? Yeah. Okay, I'm watching the game. And did you know I had to call the plumber? Yeah. I'm watching the game. And the plumber had to come in and repair everything? Yeah. I know. And did you know that the plumber charged $3,000 to do all the cleanup and a bargain, I think, right? To do all the cleanup and yeah. Could you get me a Coke? I'm watching the game. And afterwards, I talked to the plumber and I was just telling the plumber that I need a vacation. Yeah, whatever. Just get me a Coke. I'm watching the game. And so I thought that maybe a trip to Acapulco would be nice. Yeah. Get me a Coke. And so me and the plumber have decided that we're going to go to Acapulco together. Yeah, whatever. Get me the Coke. And afterwards, the man is by himself because the woman is gone. He goes, "Why doesn't she ever listen to me? Why doesn't she ever listen to me?" Sometimes we have that feeling. Why doesn't anyone listen to me? But the problem oftentimes is in order to be a good in order for someone to listen to you, you also, believe it or not, have to be a good listener. And that is the big catch, right? The big catch. I remember when I was in seminary, I've learned this lesson well because Renee can tell you how good I am at listening and how brilliant I am at listening. But when we were in seminary, we were taking a class on counseling, and part of the counseling class is that someone would say something, and they would tell us what their story or whatnot, and then we would have to repeat what they said, right? And the idea was that in counseling, the most important thing about counseling is not what you say, but what you hear. And so, what do we hear when we hear Jesus say, "Follow me"? That is the important question, and it is the question that makes us Christian. When we hear the word Jesus saying to follow me, what we do and our response to what we hear and our response to listening to what Jesus says ultimately is what makes us who we are as Christian beings, as people who believe in Jesus Christ. Now, there's a singer, Presbyterian singer. His father was a minister, and so obviously he's a good Presbyterian, because all sons and daughters of Presbyterian ministers ultimately become upstanding individuals in their own right, which is true. My own minister had 5 kids, and all of them, after they got over their juvenile delinquent days, and after they got out of prison, they were all very good kids. They really were. But anyway, this guy is a man by the name of David Lamont. L-A-M-O-T-T-E. David Lamont. And he is a singer, and he lives outside of Montreat, North Carolina. And he wrote a song, many songs, but one of my favorite songs by him is a song by the name of Butler Street. And if you ever want to listen to a good song, I would recommend that you look that up. You can find it on iTunes, 99 cents, Butler Street. Anyway, in the song, he is talking about people who follow Jesus. And he was talking about different ways that people follow Jesus. And he was talking about why he wondered, would people put up a gigantous sign on a mountaintop that says, Jesus saves? Have you ever seen those before? Have you ever, if you drive through the South or the Midwest, you can see them all over the place. I'm sure David Lamont, who grew up in the South, probably saw them. And he was wondering, why, when you have this beautiful mountain that God has created for us, why would anyone want to deface it with a sign? It doesn't make any sense. And another thing he was saying is he was wondering why individuals who will often come up to you, and you probably know these people, come up to you and say, do you believe in Jesus Christ? Have you ever had someone come up to you and say, do you believe in Jesus Christ? Has that ever happened to you? Has anyone ever knocked on your door with a pamphlet and asked you, do you believe in Jesus Christ? And he said what he wonders oftentimes is when people come up to him and ask him, do you believe in Jesus Christ, with their hands in their pocket and with no care in their eyes and no desire to really know what the answer is. He was wondering if that's a real good idea of representing Christ Jesus. And then he was talking in the song about a man who is standing in line at a soup kitchen when a car drives by. He says shiny hubcaps jump through the puddle, and the water goes all over this man as he's waiting in line to go in a soup kitchen. And what does the man say? Turns to David Lamont and says, but for the grace of God, go I. In other words, if I was not so lucky, maybe I would be driving that fancy car and not standing here at the soup kitchen. You wonder, what does it mean to follow Jesus? Does it mean to say a bunch of words? Does it mean to say what you believe to as many people that would hear? Does it mean putting up these grand signs and saying, believe in Jesus Christ? Does it mean handing out pamphlets and saying, come, join our church? Does it mean going to the mountaintops with your hands in your pocket with no concern and saying, believe in Jesus Christ and have a relationship with Him? Or does it mean going into the world, getting your hands dirty and following Jesus, even if it means carrying a cross to Golgotha? I wonder what it means. When I was in college, I was in the drama club. I don't say that too often because I'm afraid that Pete D'Angelo might hear that. And unfortunately, he happens to be here today, so he did hear that. So anyway, I was in the drama club when I was in college, and I never had any particularly good roles, except for 1 year. The school, Hiram College, decided to put on a play about Archbishop Romero. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Archbishop Romero. He was an archbishop. That's why he gets the name Archbishop Romero. And he was a Roman Catholic archbishop from El Salvador. And he was chosen to be the Archbishop of El Salvador at a time when there was great revolution in El Salvador. You may have remembered it during those days in the 80s when there was great tumult in El Salvador. And he was chosen, and one of the reasons why he was chosen is because he had a PhD in prayer. A PhD in prayer. And the Catholic Church in El Salvador thought that if we elevate someone with a PhD in prayer, they're bound to be quiet and pray a lot. And so what happened is Archbishop Romero did pray. He got down on his knees and he prayed like any good, respecting PhD in prayer would do. And I recommend, if you haven't gotten a PhD in prayer, you can go online, www.PhDinPrayer, and get one online. Anyway, he gets down on his knees and he prays, and what does he hear God say? He says, listen, there are people in the world who need me in this world. There are hungry people. There are poor people. There are people that are in pain. You need to go out and you need to feed my sheep. And so he goes out and he starts to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ in a way that was a little bit different because it involved getting your hands dirty a little bit. Well, what did I play? I played not Archbishop Romero. That's the part I wanted. I thought it would be cool, you know, getting all the robes and the hat, and, you know, going out there. No, I played the guy who killed Archbishop Romero. I got to wear fatigues and carry a machine gun, and I got to walk into the church where Archbishop Romero was serving Holy Communion behind the altar, and I got to take my gun and I got to shoot him in the midst of the congregation where he was preaching, and he was killed and gunned down while he was serving communion because he chose to follow Jesus Christ in a way that meant that people didn't like him very much. And it meant that ultimately he paid the price by carrying the cross to Golgotha and being crucified with Christ Jesus. As I was shooting Archbishop Romero with my machine gun at Hiram College, I was reminded in a way, every time I turn away from the calling of Jesus, it's almost like I participate in it. When I was in seminary, a few years later, I went to a church. And the church was in Greenwich Village. And I may have told you this story, but it still moves me to this day. Greenwich Village, there's a church called Judson Memorial Church. It's a Baptist church, believe it or not. I actually entered into this Baptist church. And I liked going to the Baptist church there because they had no pews. And once a month, they would have an open mic night on Sunday service. And so you could sit in there and people would get up, and Broadway singers would get up, people that had been in the chorus, and they would get up and they would sing a song, and they would say, this one I dedicate to God, and they would get up and sing a song, and then another one would get up there and sing, and sometimes they would read poetry, and they would do all these neat things, and I enjoyed it because I got to sit there and listen to these amazing singers sing, and in the middle of this sanctuary was this big cross, much like the cross that is in the back of our church there. And next to the cross was a bucket filled with nails. And tied to the cross was a hammer. And you would go in and you would take the nail and you would nail it to the cross. The idea came from someone that you may have heard of. Her name is Yoko Ono, who attended that church. She was John Lennon's wife, and she went to that church, and she came up with the idea because she said that each of us at some time or another participate in the crucifixion of Jesus. And I was reminded as I shot Oscar Romero with my machine gun at Hiram College that every time I pulled the trigger, I was somehow participating in the death of Jesus Christ, and I was coming to Judson Memorial, nailing the nail to the cross of Jesus, and it reminded me that every time I refuse to follow Jesus, whether it be turning away from him when I see someone in need, or walking away when I see someone in pain, or turning away from someone who is calling out saying, Jesus, I need you. Every time I'm doing that, I'm nailing another nail into the cross of Jesus Christ. It got me thinking that maybe the best way to be a Christian is to first stop, take a breath, and listen to the world. Listen to the pain. Listen to the needs. There was a guy, also at Union Theological Seminary, before my time, by a man who had the name of Reinhold Niebuhr. And he never got a PhD. He was a pastor in Detroit. And then he wrote some books. And he ran for political office a few times and lost at a time. And he had this idea, which I thought was interesting. He said, if you were a Christian, you should have the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. What he said was, you should feel the pain of the world and respond to it with your Christian faith. You should know what's going on in the world. You should respond to it with the calling of Jesus. You should know the agony that goes on in the world, and you should respond to it with the calling of Jesus Christ. And don't tell me that there are not issues in the world that rock us, because there are. When we live in a society where someone can't go to the store and buy Skittles and an iced tea and walk home to his mother's or his father's house and not be shot down because he looks suspicious, we know that there's a problem in this world, and God is calling us to follow Christ Jesus in the midst of this world. Now, you can do it in lots of different ways. You can do it start slowly, or you can do it with a big bang. But tell me, there's not need in the world for a Christian voice. Tell me there's not need in the world for a follower of Jesus. Tell me there's not a need in this community for someone who is willing to say, I love Jesus and I'm going to do something about it. Tell me there's not that need, and I will give up on Christianity entirely. Because if there's no need for Christ Jesus, there's really no need for us. But I think there is. And I think it begins in our ability to listen and then to take up the cross